In today's briefing, I will begin by summarizing and giving context to the Prime Minister's recent engagements, and also there are other briefing points that we can explore. So to begin with the official state visit to Nigeria that had been undertaken by the Prime Minister on the 25th of May. As you know, Ethiopia and Nigeria have had long-standing relations since both countries opened their embassies in their respective capitals in the 1960s. Since then, there has been several official visits that have been undertaken by both countries. And after the Prime Minister took office, President Buhari had also held an official state visit to Ethiopia. So during the stay in Abuja, the two leaders discussed bilateral, regional, international issues of mutual concern. And currently, Nigeria and Ethiopia are both working on several areas of bilateral cooperation, which you already may know, particularly in the areas of defense, aviation, science and technology, industry, trade and investment, and a plethora of other areas. Hence, part of their discussions entailed an agreement to enhance the cooperation in these fields, as well as the others that have not been stated. Also, the third Ethio-Nigeria Joint Ministerial Commission meeting will be held within the second week of June this year, where several memorandum of understandings are expected to be signed, particularly on these areas of cooperation and others. To this end, the two leaders also reiterated their readiness to make the upcoming Joint Ministerial Commission a success. And with these points, it's also important to underscore the domestic disinformation that has been circulating the past week on the intent of the state visit to Nigeria. Following the state visit to Nigeria, the Prime Minister, accompanied with his ministerial delegation, headed to Equatorial Guinea, as you all know as well, to attend the African Union's Extraordinary Humanitarian Summit in Malabo. And considering the environmental and human-induced challenges that the continent, in particular the Horn region, is experiencing, the participation in this summit aimed to highlight the need for concerted effort in addressing humanitarian needs, not only domestically, but also regionally and continent-wide. So to this end, the Prime Minister, in his remarks at the summit, emphasized Ethiopia's commendation for the establishment of the African Union Humanitarian Agency, underscoring the need to be guided by the principles of Pan-Africanism and African shared values in the constitution or the makeup of the agency. He also briefed the summit on actions that Ethiopia has been in particular undertaking to address the vast humanitarian needs brought onto the country by natural disasters as well as conflict. Following the conclusion of participation at the summit, as you all know, there was a visit to the Republic of Kenya. This last leg of the trip included a short stay in Nairobi, where the Prime Minister conferred with the Kenyan President on regional as well as bilateral issues of mutual concern. Towards the end of last week, we know that the Prime Minister had also participated in the Stockholm Plus 50 engagement, and virtually the Prime Minister relayed a message during the United Nations Stockholm Plus 50 meeting. It's to be recalled that in May of last year, the United Nations General Assembly had adopted a resolution to bring the global environmental community together in Stockholm ahead of the World Environmental Day, which was yesterday. And in this participation, which the Prime Minister conveyed a message through video, he highlighted the efforts that Ethiopia has been undertaking in the past 3 years in doing its share for building a healthy environment by planting around 18 billion seedlings as part of the Green Legacy Initiative. So, as we all know, a lot of developing countries, particularly Ethiopia, are also afflicted by climate change, which they don't necessarily contribute much towards, yet the initiatives that are being undertaken and progressing on the Ethiopian side is to circumvent and taking on adaptive and mitigation measures beyond our contribution to climate change. Yesterday, on June 5th, we marked the National Police Day organized by Ethiopian Federal Police, where the Prime Minister was also in attendance to honor the sacrifice of members of the Federal Police that had participated in the National Rule of Law campaign in the northern part of the country. You would note in his remarks that he highlighted the lengths to which the country and the government is going to build a well-structured, a well-equipped security sector institutions that are professionally led in service of the nation. So yesterday's parade is a partial demonstration of security sector reforms that have been taking place over the last 2 years, and that have been obviously accelerated, particularly following the confrontation in the north. So reforming the security process or the security sector process is a process in of itself, and it need not be construed as complete package, but this is a promise that had been made when the Prime Minister came into the premiership to ensure that there's an overhaul and reformation that's being undertaken within the security sector. And yesterday's key point to be articulated in that sense is to what extent the federal police is also reforming itself and equipping itself to cater to the challenges and the needs that the country is faced with. Continuing to the second point, I want to bring to your attention that we are in the Green Legacy season, which is upon us. This year, we mark the final year of the 4-year Green Legacy Challenge, which was embarked upon in 2019 to plant 20 billion seedlings. As initiated by the Prime Minister to address various environmental challenges by promoting a green culture, this year's Green Legacy season will be launched within the next 2 weeks. When we say final year, this does not mean it's the end of Ethiopia's greening journey, but it highlights that a milestone has been achieved in keeping our 4-year commitment to build 20 billion seedlings. In this case, we will be exceeding the set target because over the past 3 years already, the data is showing that around 18 billion seedlings had been planted. So as you well know, the Green Legacy initiative includes planting edible seedling varieties. So this initiative, in tandem with the urban agriculture and backyard farming efforts being promoted, aim to partially address food security needs amidst global rise in food costs as well. I want to move on to humanitarian response updates overall, which is the third point of today's briefing. As we know, the Horn of Africa continues to be affected by climate change-induced drought, and hence why one of this administration's mid to long-term emphasis has been on the Green Legacy Initiative as a means of mitigating the consequences of climate change. So even though we might not be seeing it within, these few years, it has a long-term perspective and a generational perspective to counter the effects of climate change and the consequences of climate change that are manifesting in Ethiopia as well as the Horn region. Some parts of the country have unfortunately been experiencing dire droughts as a result of consecutive below average rainfall that has been afflicting the Horn region. At a policy level, Ethiopia has put in place several mechanisms, several policies and institutional measures with mitigation and adaptive programs at the center of these endeavors. Additionally, through Ethiopia's homegrown economic reforms program, there has been an intensification, as you would note, of cluster farming and irrigation-based lowland wheat productivity, which has shown considerable success, but this is something to be built upon as well in subsequent months and years ahead. At a response level for the needs to drought-afflicted communities in the immediate term, the government has responded much early and intensified national efforts to enhance the effectiveness of disaster risk management. Per recent data received from the National Disaster Risk Management Commission between July 2021 and May 2022, around 3.2 million beneficiaries have received food assistance brought on or for disasters brought on by nature or as a natural consequence. And these beneficiaries are mostly in Oromia, Somali region, and the southern nationalities region. Moving on to the fourth part, again as an extension of humanitarian assistance that is being provided, particularly in the northern part of the country. As it pertains to humanitarian assistance, through the government of Ethiopia's declaration of indefinite humanitarian truce, you would note that the supply of humanitarian assistance in the Tigray region continues to progress. To break it down for you a little bit, as of June 3, the data that I have from the National Disaster Risk Management Commission. So So this is for a period covering July 2021 to June 3, 2022. The cash transferred to the Tigray region totals 2.1 billion birr for humanitarian assistance. Medicine dispatched, the data that I have is above 217,000 kgs. For non-food items, which include various shelters and other protection items, the data that I have is 130,000 kilograms worth of non-food supplies. And then for food supplied, I have data which indicates above 87,000 metric tons of food that has made its way and entered the Tigray region. When it comes to fuel, above 783,000 liters of fuel has been facilitated to enter the Tigray region within this period as well. When it comes to quantifying how many trucks have reached, because part of the back and forth has been on amount of trucks that need to go in to safely provide for beneficiaries in there. 1,306, particularly in the months of April and May 2022, we have 1,306 trucks that have arrived within the Tigray region as well. And this does not include, obviously, humanitarian assistance flights that are also carrying various assistance to the region. In the Afar region, I have data that indicates that about 19,000 metric tons of food has been dispatched for beneficiaries within the region. The Amhara region, again, as a consequence of displacement or conflict-related displacement, we have around above 244,000 metric tons of food that has also been dispatched for various communities in that region. So there is a further breakdown that at a later point in time that I could also share with you on paper as well. So this is just to indicate to you that the government of Ethiopia has continued its commitment to expedite the supply of food and humanitarian assistance to reach the Tigray region. The misconception, I imagine, is starting to dissipate because there has been a concerted effort since the declaration of the humanitarian truce. So this misconception that the government of Ethiopia is obstructing humanitarian assistance continues unabated, however. In this regard, the international community is also encouraged to intensify its effort to meet humanitarian needs in Ethiopia, including for the Tigray regional state. Again, we have to also look at what I mentioned earlier as there's humanitarian needs that are growing as a result of natural disasters also. However, I mean, within the past, could say about 4 weeks or so, we have seen a rhetoric of gearing up for another confrontation from the other side. This, preparation for another offense, unfortunately, is coming in alignment with the farming season, and it's important to highlight here that the Tigray region would be, if TPLF is amping up the war drums again, as it has been doing over the past few weeks. This is going to be at the expense of citizens, within the Tigray region and farming communities who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, who have missed around in that, and then due to the conflict in the past year and a half, have missed farming seasons as well. So this instigation of violence, again, would really tremendously affect the farming cycle within the region as well. We have also data that has been emerging, and I'm sure you have seen as well that the TPLF continues to forcefully conscript people into its forces, and the belligerent atrocities again would be really detrimental to the region. So on the part of the Ethiopian government, the commitment to peace has always been there, the commitment to supporting on humanitarian assistance, ensuring that humanitarian assistance makes its way to the region, although it needs to be verified from other parties to what extent the intended beneficiaries are getting this humanitarian assistance. So with these couple of items, let me open it up to questions that you may have, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Beleni, for the explanation. 2 questions on the issue in the north. We have seen on pictures, even with the Prime Minister, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and we've seen him in Mekelle as well. What is the take from the government when it comes to the efforts being exerted by the African Union in brokering peace? 2, in Amhara region, there are also people who are in need of humanitarian assistance at the moment, and also in Oromia, because of the activities of the Oromo Liberation Army, there are people who are said to be evicted from their homes. What is being done to address these people now that the rainy season is here as part of the humanitarian effort that you're exerting? Thank you.
As it relates to the question that you asked in terms of what is the government's take for the AU-led process, this is something that the Ethiopian government has welcomed from the get-go, has been supporting of. There is a high regard for His Excellency former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Indeed, he was here with the Prime Minister reviewing current development projects in the Oromia region, as well as potential development projects as well. Whether he has been seen or not on the other end, I don't know what the discussions would have been on the other end. Nevertheless, the posture of the Ethiopian government still is a posture of wanting peace, wanting the normalization of people's lives that have been disrupted as a result of this conflict. So facilitating this process, as you know, any kind of peace process is long. It's not simple, it's a complex process. It has multi-layers as well. So at this point, the Ethiopian government is engaging with full commitment for peace to come about, is engaging with the AU-led process. So that's as much as that I could say in that regard. The fruits of that will bear in due time, and we will be able to share what that means when it manifests. The Amhara region humanitarian assistance, this is something that I had also covered earlier. So again, attention needs to be focused on that. We have, over the past months, even in briefings with you, we have been highlighting that it's important to ensure that the attention for humanitarian assistance is not taken off from people whose lives have been uprooted as a part of TPLF's belligerence in the Amhara and Afar regions. The Ethiopian government and partners are engaged in delivering humanitarian assistance to conflict-affected communities. I've just given you a brief summary of the amount of food supplies and non-food supplies that have gone into the region, but detailed after the briefing, we'll be happy to provide you with the detailed numbers on that. Nevertheless, overall, when we're looking at the humanitarian assistance, there still needs to be an increase from partners. We understand that there's other parts of the country, other parts of the world and other parts of the region that are also in dire need of humanitarian assistance brought by natural disasters, as earlier explained. But nevertheless, these regions, as part of the government is concerned, there are efforts to ensure that assistance reaches there. But again, this is also a call out to international partners to also increase the level of support for these regions, as well as the other regions that are affected as well.
The TPLF and the Eritrean government are blaming one another of provoking war these days. So what is the Ethiopian government's take right now in this regard?
I can't speak on behalf of both parties, so I don't have any definite information as it relates to that. So I think it's important to pass that. And if there's any further information that comes, particularly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs side, I'll be happy to share it with you, but I don't have any further information. Noé, then.
Thank you for the briefing. The Deputy Prime Minister said that banned equipment was transported to Tigray recently. Can we have a bit more detail on that? And another question on Zimbabwe. Recently, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared that they were ready to extradite Mengistu Haile Mariam. Did the Ethiopian government made any requests in that sense?
Okay. On banned equipment, Noé, this is, I think, an outcome of the Deputy Prime Minister's recent visit to the Afar region. So I would defer to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to give you more details on that. Again, for your second question as well, I defer to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because this is a matter under their purview.
Bilene, thanks for the briefing. Just two short questions. One, on the issue of the humanitarian assistance going into the Tigray region. Has the government opened up the access enough? Because I believe the government is still getting accusations that it has not opened up enough for more to go into the Tigray region. I mean, what's the status of the government on that in terms of access? Then secondly, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission has raised concern about arrest of journalists, especially local journalists, saying that probably those who have been arrested should be brought to court. There's a delay in that. I don't know. Does that kind of dent the Prime Minister's image that already came out as a government that allows freedom of speech? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Coletta. I mean, I don't think I have anything more to add on part of the humanitarian assistance, because I did already share the kind of the perspective that is out there versus what is being done on the part of the government. You would note that there's certain figures that have been floating in terms of the required need within the region. As far as the Ethiopian government and the data that I have from the National Disaster Risk Management Commission, it shows that anywhere between 100 to 200 trucks are entering per week per week. Within the region. I will have to verify that for you. But there is a lot of effort and a lot of goodwill to facilitate the humanitarian assistance to that region. But the question again that I leave for you is humanitarian assistance reaching the intended beneficiaries as well? Because on the part of the Ethiopian government, I think there's a lot of agencies also that are testifying to the fact that there's much more movement as it relates to assistance. Your second question of journalists or the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission statement, it's important to note that there are laws that have come as a result of the reforms. The media landscape and the media space has really opened up. We cannot deny that, because it's always important to look at what had been before and the goodwill and the responsibility that the current administration has taken in terms of opening up the media space. So part of the reforms that came about is the media law and the exercise of freedom of speech. The extent of the exercise of freedom of speech is something that you can monitor in various scenarios as well. So there is that practice, a democratic practice that is coming as part of a culture that is facilitating open space in terms of media. At the same time, we're also particularly experiencing a time where there's polarization along ethnic lines and along religious lines as well. So there's also rules and there are also laws that have been put in place in order to ensure that people are not affected as a result of that, hence the hate speech law as well and disinformation laws. When we talk about journalists, I think it's really important to unpack who is a journalist and who is not, because there's a lot of outcry that has been heard over the past few weeks in terms of journalists that have been arrested. But as far as the Ethiopian Media Authority, which is a regulatory body that licenses journalists, is aware, many of these that are going under the banner of journalists are not accredited or not licensed under the Media Authority. Yes, some of them may fall under online media. However, there are also online media that the Ethiopian Media Authority has registered and is close contact with. So in order to follow up those details, they would need to also come under that umbrella. The second part to also highlight in this is when we talk about journalism, I think it's a respected profession. There are ethics that guide journalism. There are principles that guide journalism. So if everybody with a YouTube channel is considered a journalist and there is no, means of regulating, what is said to the extent that it is pushing along these ethnic and religious cleavages and creating or fomenting, cleavages along societal lines and ethno-linguistic lines, then it's very problematic. I think also as media entities and media houses, it's important for you to explore which entities do fall under these strict definitions of, journalistic practices and so on. So I think it's better to respond to that in that manner.
Thank you very much. My questions are somewhat related to what Colette has raised. In addition to, the said journalists, we have seen the mass arrest of individuals, both here in Addis and, here in Addis and in Amhara region, following the launching of what the government has been calling a law enforcement operation. So we've seen thousands of people jailed in a rather short period of time. and there have been concerns raised about these arrests as well. So are you concerned that these operations might, some of these individuals that are arrested might see their rights violated? And in some areas we have also heard reports of confrontations and deaths as well. So are you concerned that there might be some civilians that might be caught in the crossfire? This is also the case in Oromia as well, because prior to what happened in Amhara, we heard the launching of another operation there, particularly against the Oromo Liberation Army. And during that operation, we have heard quite a number of reports about and allegations about civilian deaths. Some of them were, reported by some media outlets. So, are you concerned that these operations might pose threats to the well-being and the safety of civilians?
I think it's really important to understand that the safety and well-being of civilians in these particular regions that you've mentioned, as well as regions throughout the country, is the purpose of rule of law operations that are being administered by the government. There are many cases within both regions, because these are operations that are being taken by the regions themselves. But there are many instances in which civilians, at the behest of illegal organizations and entities that are not part of security sector or government security sector, are causing harm to civilians within these regions as well. So there is an outcry from members of various communities within these two regions for the government to ensure rule of law. Ensuring the rule of law means there are certain measures that the government would have to take to ensure that individuals who are falling or operating outside mandated security apparatuses and who may be proliferating small arms, who may be proliferating various kind of arms within the regions, are brought to or apprehended, because part of ensuring rule of law and part of ensuring peace and stability for civilians, as you mentioned it, is ensuring that there is clarity in terms of where the monopoly of violence or where the monopoly of law rests, of power. So these events that have been undertaken, or these individuals that you say that have been apprehended, are those that have been operating outside the legal lines. They have been bringing a lot of destruction to communities. They have been using, because we have to understand that particularly in the Amhara region, it is a post-war region in a way, because it has been challenged by TPLF's aggression and incursions. There has been a build-up of arms as well, illegal arms, that has been also a conduit for a lot of illegal arms. So there are certain bodies that are not acknowledged by the regional government that are operating outside of these confines. So these operations are made to ensure that they are also falling into line. And from the information and the data that I have, disarmament has been underway, and in fact over the past 4 weeks the region has also been indicating that it has been successful in bringing a certain sense of control to those outliers. So part of that as well has been people or individuals that you've mentioned who have been instigating disinformation along ethnic lines, along religious lines. The operating context that I shared to you is there is individuals that are enhancing or increasing the polarization of certain areas along ethnic and religious lines, and this is not acceptable because the Ethiopia that this government is working for, the Ethiopia that a lot of entities are working for, and as well as what citizens aspire for, is one that is not divided along these cleavages. So any individuals that are operating to further create cleavages have to be apprehended. So it is in that spirit that within the Amhara and Oromia regions these operations have been undertaken. Thank you very much, and we'll follow up with subsequent briefings if there's anything else.